Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you're viewing this. I am Professor Angela Banks, and if you're viewing this, you're in my Hbse I class taught at Hbse University. You guys are super lucky because I'm actually recording this for the second time. I can't promise you my PowerPoint and my lecture is going to be as long, but you'll get all of the information that you need, no worries. With that, I'm going to pull up our lecture for this week. And you notice in D2L that I actually put up your PowerPoint with the in-depth information about some theories and concepts that we'll talk about today. So this is not the PowerPoint that you originally saw yesterday, but this is the PowerPoint that you'll see in D2L today. So again, you hear my dog, we're at home, what can we do? Okay, Ocho. So just to do a little check-in, I really appreciated seeing all of your posts in D2L regarding our discussion topic when we talk about milestones in relations to those very integral ages. We talk about between infancy all the way up until 11. So if you read your text, which I hope you did, we start to begin to dive into some of those theories and concepts that relate directly to developmental milestones, such as those physical, those cognitive developments. So I really enjoyed the beginning stages of seeing your thoughts and your feedback with one another, because we're going to build off of those thoughts as we continue through the semester. So you'll see me post some general statements within those discussion board posts to kind of address you as a collective, but I will also address specific students within their posts as well. So keep a lookout for those things. In the classroom setting, it's easier to kind of get that feedback to you in real time, but I'm really hoping that you guys are able to see the feedback as I'm relaying it to you. If you have any questions in relation to anything with the class, please feel free to send me an email. I know some students have been emailing me about some of the assignments, and no worries, you will have some grading rubrics available to you as needed. So we'll jump right in. So generalist social work practice, and what does that mean to you? You are all, for the most part, sophomores, juniors within your social work career. So you hear this terminology of generalist social work. So social workers are much more than case workers, group workers, or community organizers. They are generalists. So we work in a wide variety of fields. I myself, in my experience, have worked in child welfare. I've worked with the elderly. I've worked with children and families. So there's a wide range of, roles that we play, and we'll talk about that within the lecture today. Generalist practitioners use a wide range of knowledge and skills to help people with an extensive array of problems and issues. So as you go through your social work classes, you'll hear a lot of the same terminology in those techniques and skills and methods that we use. And that's just our way of building off of those concepts, because social work is very general, but we have our macro, we have our meso, we have our micro levels within it as well. So within human behaviors in the social environment context, so talk about concepts from systems theory and ecological perspectives, or people within their environments. And by definition, system theory used to describe and analyze people and other living systems and their interactions. So with that, we talk about the person in their environment and the knowledge that the person is always engaging with their environment. They're always experiencing new things and interpreting those new experiences. And as we think about our current context and dealing with COVID-19, especially, how was that impacting the environment? How was that impacting human behavior? How was that impacting development in our society? So this focus views people as constantly interacting with various systems around them. So these systems can include family, friends, work, social services, politics, religion, economic systems, so on and so forth. So social work practice is directed at improving the interactions between the person and the various systems. So how I interact with my local government, how you may interact with your local school. So thinking about how our client systems interact with the different things around them. The personal and environment perspective is based on the belief that the profession's basic mission requires a dual focus on the person and the environment and a common structured approach to the helping process. So we can't just look at the person and we can't just look at the environment. We have to look at both together and see how they work and interact with one another. So building off of that, look, I'm right in the middle. I just wish I could be sarcastic with you guys in class. I would just enjoy that so much, especially after giving a lecture twice. I'm like, I really want to engage with you guys. So ecological ecosystems theories, we start to look at what is the makeup of the systems around our client system, our clients. So if you see in the middle, the green is the individual. So the individual will be that microsystem, the system closest to the person in which they have the most direct contact. So after that, we look at our microsystems, and that's also tied in with family, siblings, peers, school, work, etc. Those are the microsystems that we start to look at. You'll also notice that it ties in with levels of micro social work, so working directly with individuals. After that, we have our mesosystem. So this is the interaction between the different parts of a person's exterior, so to speak, but not the exosystem. So this is possibly family, siblings, peers, schools, but it can also be those community entities that play a part of that person's system as well, which builds off of the exosystem, and it's a setting that does not involve the person as an active participant, but still affects them. So you might see policies, you might see procedures in place for agencies, especially as it relates to COVID-19. How do those systems kind of impact the individual, impact those inner workings of the community? Following that, we look at our macro system. So that's the cultural environment in which the person lives and all the other systems that affect them, which lends to the chronos system, the dimension of time in relation to a person's development. So as we talk about theories, as you guys dive in to social work, to what generalist practices, to what exploring human behaviors in a social environment really is, you'll learn about those laws, those social conditions, those economic systems, culture, history that kind of build off of the foundation externally. So let's talk about some key concepts in systems theory. So we talk about systems theories. We know that it's a lot of inner workings. So let's talk about some of the terms so that as we start to dive into those inner workings, you're not lost. So systems, when I'm talking about systems, it's a set of elements that are orderly and interrelated to make a functional role. So for instance, you'll hear me refer to clients and you'll hear me refer to client systems. Speaking of clients, I'm speaking of individual. Client systems might be, for me, those systems that are really a part of that client. So family, siblings, those immediate relationships. As well as if I'm working with a group of people, I might call that my client system. Then we talk about boundaries, and it defines the appropriate roles that will be enacted by those comprising the system. So for example, student, professor, secretary, university president, client, clinician, those are the boundaries that we talk about. So thinking about appropriate boundaries as you think about, thinking about appropriate boundaries as you think about what roles you want to play in the field of social work. Subsystems are a secondary or a subordinate system. So it may be thought of as a smaller system within a larger system. So our class is a subsystem of Westchester University's undergraduate social work classes. Other examples would be the parental and sibling subsystems within a family. So my parents might be their system and me and my brother might be our own system, which happen very often. So subsystems are set apart or defined by designated boundaries, yet still a part of the larger total system. So we still have our boundaries within our families, but also noticing that there's the children's subsystem and the parent subsystem within that whole system. Hoping that makes sense. Next, we look at homeostasis, and this is the tendency for a system to maintain a relatively stable state of balance. So if something disturbs that balance, the system will adapt and restore the stability previously achieved. And it's interesting because we're currently in the midst of trying to find a homeostasis ground within our society currently. However, with COVID-19 being so, you know, unknown how to address it, it's kind of hard to find that balance, that homeostasis. So this does not necessarily mean that the system is functioning well. It means that the system tends to maintain the status quo. So we're seeing new shifts in our homeostasis currently. So roles. A role is a culturally determined pattern of behavior expected of an individual in a specific social relationship. So my role within my family is going to be different from my role within teaching you about human behaviors in a social environment, just like it would be different about teaching maybe my client about how their environment may impact their behaviors. So each individual involved in the system assumes a role within that system. And each of us probably fulfills numerous roles because we are involved in multiple systems. That goes without saying. Next, we look at a relationship. So a relationship is the mutual emotional exchange or dynamic interaction, an effective cognitive and behavioral connection between two or more persons or systems. So a social worker may have a professional relationship with the client. They communicate and interact in order to meet the client's needs, in order to fulfill that relationship need. Input involves energy, information, or communication flow received from other systems. So what input are you putting in? A parent may receive input from a child's grade school principal that the child is doing poorly in physical education, or a public agency may receive input from the state in the form of funding. So as we talk about social work and we talk about more macro level concepts and looking at, as a social worker, what are you inputting into those systems? What is your relationship and how does your input impact the output? So output is what happens to input after it's been processed by some system. For example, once an agency has received funding for a program, it may provide X number of hours of individual counseling, X number of hours of drug abuse education, and X number of hours of collaborating with other agencies, for example, public schools or hospitals. What's important at this junction is once you put your input and you get your output, there's feedback involved. So feedback is a special form of input. It involves a system receiving information about its own performance. As a result of negative feedback, the system can choose to correct any mistakes and return to a more homeostatic state. Positive feedback is also valuable as it involves a system receiving information about what it's doing correctly. An interface is the point in which two systems of any size or junction or role come in contact with each other and communicate. So I thought this cartoon was super funny when we think about input, output, feedback, and then, you know, looking at the different types of feedback. So it says, wow, I appreciate your input. What I really need from you is some output. And as we look at our systems and we look at that notion, like, can I really output something without first having some sort of input? And when we look at human behaviors in the social environment, do our clients and our client systems have the ability to input so that they can get the output that they think that they need, or the output that is best suited for them and what their specific needs are? So that's why I think that feedback is important. And we look at the census that's currently happening, and that's how members of a society give their input, provide their feedback. Some other key terms are differentiation, which is a system's tendency to move from a more simplified to more complex existence. And the life of any system, each day adds new experiences, new information is gathered, and new options are explored. Entropy is the tendency of a system to progress toward disorganization, depletion, and death. Nothing lasts forever. People age and they eventually die. It is a natural progression of any system. And then we look at negative entropy. This is the process of a system toward growth and development. It is the system's resistance to entropy. So, as we begin to look at theoretical approaches to human behaviors in a social environment, you are super fortunate that I actually posted a PowerPoint on D2L that actually talks about all of the theoretical approaches in addition to your textbook. So hopefully that will serve as a resource for you throughout your social work education as well as for your discussion board for this week. But what are theoretical approaches as it relates to human behaviors in the social environment? And we start to talk about theories. So theories are a coherent group of principles, concepts, and ideas organized to explain some observable occurrence or trend. So as we talk about theories, we'll talk about how it relates to what situations you may encounter. I will use some real life examples throughout our lectures. I won't share any names because, HIPAA laws, self-disclosure, things like that, which I know you talk about in generalist practice classes. But we will tie some of those real life examples into theory so that you guys are better able to connect it. In addition, we use frameworks within social work, and this is for how we view the world. It also indicates on what aspects of a situation you should focus on when trying to understand why people behave the way they do, especially within the context of their environment. So some of those theoretical perspectives that I actually mentioned in the PowerPoint in D2L and are highlighted in chapter 1 of your text that I'm sure you all have read based off of the discussion board posts I've seen. But what are some of those theoretical perspectives? I'll list some of these so that as you talk about them in your discussion board, you have a little bit of a framework to work with. So looking at Afrocentric perspectives and worldviews, you can potentially look at aging theories as it relates to, parenting styles, perhaps, as it relates to how people are interacting and engaging with younger, adolescents during this time. Looking at Erickson's psychosocial theory, as well as some feminist theories, Fowler's theory of faith development, look at some gains and sociological theories, also mentioned Piaget's theory of cognitive development, as well as sexual orientation development theory. So as you dive into the text and you dive into our discussion board, we'll be connecting these theories as well as some other ones that you guys find interesting within those milestones that you talked about. So I look forward to reading those. I look forward to following up with you all in relations to those as well. So for next week, please take a look at that PowerPoint that I posted on D2L that talks about the specific theories. Unfortunately, with the first video not saving, I decided that I will not, read each theory, verbatim. So your discussion board prompt is available now on D2L. Please respond to the prompt as well as reply to 2 of your peers by Monday. I extended the date 1 day by 10 p.m. In addition, your social history paper is due next week, next Wednesday. So please have those submitted on D2L in the assignment section. So with that, I will end this lecture and you guys have a great one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you all next week.